Hey, Larken Rose here, and wanted to do a video about the recent shootings, the one in Connecticut and the one in Aurora, Colorado too. And I would start by cautioning people, beware anytime something happens that's so horrible and dreadful and shocking that you feel your feelings and emotions drowning out your ability to think rationally, because that does not lead to good things happening. Now, there are a lot of things about both stories that are sort of, the reporting was either horribly incompetent or just plain inaccurate. In the Connecticut one, the story was he had two handguns, a Sig Sauer and a Glock, and later it was, no, he had a rifle with him. The first time it was, there was a rifle he left in the car, and then suddenly, no, he did the whole thing with a rifle. So, I don't know what the truth was, I just know the media changed their story about a zillion times. And other people have mentioned the fact that Obama's all tearful on TV and looking so emotionally moved by this, and come on, you know, look up what he's doing with drones. He has personally given the orders that have killed a heck of a lot more kids than 20. And so don't give me that, oh, here's this compassionate president. No, he's a murderer. There's a murder in the White House. There's always a murder in the White House. And of course, the thing that the leftists and the tyrants are talking about is we have to take away all these military-style weapons from you stupid rabble and have only the government mercenaries have them. Now, they know that assault weapons, a term they constantly misuse, that semi-automatic rifles are used in a trivially small amount of crime. Now, this particular story was big and scary and shocking and horrible, and so, you know, I'm not saying, oh, it's trivial what happened. Statistically, it's trivial. There were more murders on that day in the rest of the country than there were in Connecticut on that one day of this horrible mass shooting. And in a tiny percentage, these assault weapons, which aren't assault weapons, they're semi-automatic rifles, are used. And the politicians know that, so maybe you should start thinking, why do they constantly focus on a weapon that is used in a trivial amount of crime? And if you dare to think about that rationally, you might actually come to realize what they want is to take away the weapons that the people would use to defend themselves against their own government, a la the Second Amendment. That's why that's what they care about. They're not that concerned about handguns or knives, for that matter. They're scared of what people might use to resist government. So that's what they're trying to ban, even though statistically it's insignificant. Now, it's really hard for us to grasp the size of the country and what 300 million people really means. We hear, you know, 27 people murdered. That's huge, except that's like half of the daily average in the country, which is horrible. But people, they hear a story like that and they sort of project it onto the whole world when it isn't the whole world. It was a statistically tiny blip, but because of the nature of the story and, you know, this horrible, you know, children dying and, you know, every horrible thing you can imagine, it's all the media is talking about. Now the hundreds of people who have been murdered since then in the country who didn't get mentioned in the news, well, it's just because the story didn't quite fit and it didn't make for a good shock thing that would keep people interested. So, never mind all that detail and stuff, let's get into the basic concepts involved. When somebody hears, oh my gosh, there's somebody shooting people at a school and they dial 911, why do they do that? Because they want the cops to come running. Okay, why? Do they think the cops are going to come running in and their fancy hats will save the day? Or do they think the cops will come running and their shiny badges will stop the bad guy in his tracks? Or do they call the cops because they want the cops to show up with guns, so that the cops and their guns can stop the psycho and his guns? We all know that that's why people call 911. I want a good guy with a gun here to deal with a bad guy with a gun here. This is not complicated. That is the solution. If there's a bad guy with a gun who's willing to kill innocent people, you can reason with him and ask nicely or write legislation. The only thing that's going to stop him is a good guy with a gun. Obviously. And the idea, and nobody's out there suggesting that, oh my gosh, look at what the shooter did, let's disarm the cops. But that's no more ridiculous saying, look what the shooter did, let's disarm all the innocent Americans who own firearms. Why? What did they do? They're a protection for you. But because of the agenda of the control freak collectivists trying to twist this into everybody out there is a potential murderer, let's disarm them all because of what that guy did. Well, why don't you start with, oh, look at what that guy did, we better disarm the cops. I'd be more for that than disarming the general public. But it's a silly misdirect, and the fact that so many people are falling for it is just kind of sad. But it's kind of understandable because it is so emotional and so horrible that so many people just say, we have to do something. And they don't bother to think, well, do what? Are you doing something to make yourself feel better? To make yourself feel like, well, at least I did something? Or are you just doing something because you actually want to fix the problem? Now, if you want to take it upon yourself to take personal responsibility to make society safer, there is a way to do that. If you're of sound mind and sound body and responsible enough to do it, buy a gun, learn how to use it, get a carry permit if you're somewhere where you can do that, and take it upon yourself to be one of the good guys who has the ability and willingness to use force to protect the innocent from the bad guys. And there are millions and millions of people out there who already do that. And they're called gun owners. And they're the ones that get demonized. And millions of other people who don't own firearms and know nothing about them benefit every single day by having these other people who are usually carrying concealed. In some states you can carry openly. But all the people out there who are carrying and making the people around them safer as a result. And the sad thing is those people are then duped by the politicians into thinking what we need is to disarm everybody. So the people out there carrying who make you safer, even if you didn't know it, you didn't even know they were carrying, but you would quickly find out. If somebody barged in the door and said, I'm going to kill everybody, suddenly you'd find out, oh, Bob's got a gun. That's really convenient right now. And that actually happens. And the media does a completely lousy job of reporting it. That people with carry permits actually prevent crimes from happening. Now, yeah, it's not as sensational to report a giant school shooting didn't happen today because somebody pulled a gun, but it is noteworthy to have somebody pull a gun, and it just happened in Oregon, and I think a off-duty sheriff down in, I forget what state it was in, just prevented a different shooting, and that's worth mentioning. And people who, you know, NRA members who get American Rifleman and stuff, there's the Armed Citizen, like a monthly thing that has a bunch of stories of private gun owners preventing crime, which happens all the time. But you never know it from watching the mainstream media. They don't want you to know that the way for you to be safer is for all the good people around you to be armed. Obviously, if there's a bad guy there with a gun, what you want is a good guy with a gun. I mean, this isn't rocket science. And if you think, well, we just need police everywhere, that doesn't work. I mean, look at the statistics, or just ask a cop. A cop can tell you most of the time what they do is show up and write a report after the fact. They don't show up in time to stop a crime. Criminals don't wait around 10 minutes for the cops to show up and then kill you. They do their crime, they run away, and then the cops write a report about it. But carry permit holders hugely outnumber cops in the states where that's allowed, so they can be all over the place, in malls and in theaters, and they could be in schools if the politicians didn't make them gun-free zones. By the way, Connecticut, which already has some pretty tough gun control, meaning victim disarmament, I think in 1998, they changed it. You used to be able to carry a firearm on school property if you had a carry permit in Connecticut, which I'm not sure how hard it is to get there. They don't have shall issue laws, so they can make it harder to jump through hoops to get a carry permit. You used to be able to carry on school grounds, and after 98 they said, nope, we're not going to have that. How well did that work? You just made it a little bit less likely that there'd be a good guy with a gun when it happened. So if you actually want the world to be safer, trying to disarm the good people is just about the stupidest thing you could possibly do. But really the main point I want to make in this video is something that I don't think I've ever heard anybody else say it. You know, lots of people will say that gun control actually increases crime and gun violence. and Dr. John Lott did a huge study on that. His book, More Guns, Less Crime, shows that when the average people are armed, the violent crime rate goes down, including the firearms-related crime rate goes down when more people have guns and when more people carry guns. So lots of people talk about that, but I want to go a step further. If you advocate gun control, what the politicians call gun control, you are advocating gun violence. And I don't mean indirectly, I don't mean it's an accidental effect, I mean gun control is gun violence. And the only reason people don't recognize this is they so are indoctrinated into authoritarianism and belief in law that they literally don't even think about what they're advocating. Now, there are how many million people in this country who own semi-automatic rifles? And those out there saying, let's ban these semi-automatic rifles because blah, blah, blah. What do you think you're saying? Think through what you're actually advocating. Are you saying, well, the president should go ting with his magic wand and poof, they'll disappear? No, that's not what happens. What you're advocating is the president should write on a piece of paper something that says, if you own one of these, you have to hand them over. And if you don't, we're going to send men with guns to your house. Not just to take away your guns, and by the way, they're going to have semi-automatic rifles when they show up at your house, but to take you away and put you in a cage. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you threatened anybody, but because you owned a piece of hardware that the government didn't approve of. That is gun violence. Every law is a threat backed by the ability and willingness to use deadly force. The government isn't asking nicely. When they pass a gun law, they say, if you disobey this, we put you in a cage. And we will use whatever level of force it takes to get you in our custody and cage you. And if you resist, and when we show up with guns, if you resist with guns, we will shoot you. So if you're out there advocating gun control, thinking that's peaceful and compassionate, think about what you're actually advocating. You're actually advocating that millions of people there who haven't threatened or hurt anyone should be threatened with violence by men with guns for owning a thing. Not because they did something bad, but just for owning a thing. So gun control is the euphemism for it. Gun violence is what it actually is. It's what every law is. The war on drugs is gun violence. So it amazes me that people say, well, I'm anti-violence and I'm anti-gun, so I believe in gun control. Gun control is men with guns using violence against innocent people. But people don't think it through. Because they believe in authority and government and they think it has an exemption from morality, they fail to miss the point that what they're advocating is, let's have a huge gang of people with guns, known as the ATF, or the state agencies, go around threatening violence against anybody else who happens to possess the same things that the ATF possesses. Actually, they possess machine guns and stuff. So they already, if you have what they have, they'll come to your house and drag you away and cage you or kill you if you resist. Gun control is gun violence. Don't say you're against gun violence and for gun control. They're the same damn thing. If you advocate that somebody threatens to take my guns from me and threatens to cage me if I don't turn them over, don't pretend you're peaceful and compassionate and you believe in peaceful coexistence and getting along and you're loving and caring. You're not. You're advocating gun violence. So unless you would feel okay personally hiring a mercenary to kick down some old lady's door, point a gun in her face and say, hand over your guns, if you wouldn't feel okay doing that, then don't feel okay supporting gun control, because it's the same damn thing. What Obama is suggesting is we should threaten violence against millions of people who didn't threaten anybody, who didn't shoot anybody, didn't harm anybody, didn't do anything, because they possess something that government agents possess all the time. But we're going to attack them for possessing a thing, even if they've been completely responsible, completely good, haven't hurt anybody. We're going to attack them, and people think that's compassionate. It's not. If you actually believe in peaceful coexistence, if you actually want people to get along, don't initiate violence against other people. Don't advocate government initiate violence against other people. That makes you a stupid thug. And if you think that is going to fix what happened in Connecticut or Aurora or any of the other crimes happening, you just need to think more. Listen less to politicians and use your brain more.